Welcome back to the Project Hope Virginia podcast, empowering voices in homeless education in McKinney-Vento. I'm your host, Kate Miller, Training and Communication Specialist with Project Hope Virginia, Virginia's program for the education of homeless children and youth. In the first episode of season 2 of the podcast, we'll continue to highlight the amazing work of McKinney-Vento liaisons from across the state who work tirelessly to ensure that students facing housing instability get access to educational stability. And I am thrilled to introduce our guest for today's episode, Michelle Swisher, the McKinney-Vento Liaison from Spotsylvania County Public Schools here in Virginia. And we'll hear all about the innovative practices and programming that Michelle and her team employ throughout the school year to ensure that students facing homelessness are identified, enrolled, and given the support that they need to succeed in school. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So if we could just kick it off by having you talk about how long you've been in your role as a McKinney-Vento liaison, as well as the approximate number of students that you serve, and just talk a little bit about the demographic and community makeup of Spotsylvania.
Sure. So Spotsylvania is a community that's halfway between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, Virginia. So we have a little bit of rural, a little bit of urban, and a lot of suburban area to cover. We have 23,700 students in our district. We have 17 elementary schools, 7 middle schools, 5 high schools, and 1 alternative program. So we support all of those locations with our team. We currently, right now, as of today, have about 345 students that are displaced in our district. And last year we ended with just 560-ish students. So we want, of course, not have any students. So unfortunately, we see that uptake is occurring in our community. We serve from preschool students to 12th grade. We really work to provide a lot of services for our students to make sure they're supported in all areas and kind of embracing that whole child concept.
As you've just highlighted the number of students facing housing instability in Spotsylvania, can you talk about some of those specific challenges that you see them facing as you support them in your work?
Sure. So I think one of the things it's important to mention in Spotsylvania that we don't have any shelters in Spotsylvania that service families other than our domestic violence shelter. So the shelters that are available are outside of our community. So that does impose some hardships for families a lot of times because of that transportation component. And it's important to be aware of, like, being kind of rural, our community doesn't have a lot of access to public transportation. It doesn't go to those rural communities. I think one of the challenges that will face families is to be able to even get to, like, our social services office to gather benefit opportunities. That can be a hardship for families. When it comes to school, again, we don't have a lot of transportation options. So we don't have an activity bus. So parents are having to do pickup after school. If students want to participate in after school activities, that can be a hardship for families. We have a high population, of course, of doubled up families. And as you know, I'm sure your listeners are aware of, one of the concerns when you're working with that population is the real instability of housing, that you could be kicked out the next day. And with us not having shelter options, that poses that threat of what's going to happen to those families. So unfortunately, we have had some families in this probably the past year, more so than ever in my career. And I've been a McKinney-Vento liaison since about 2012. That we've had families that have had to stay in their cars until we can figure out how to get them someplace. So when you think about that being a barrier for families, and then we're expecting kids to come to school and be ready to learn and everything, that's a hardship. But I am thankful that our school district this year, all schools across the district are providing free lunch and free breakfast. So we know, of course, with McKinney-Ventos, those protections are in place. But if those students haven't been identified yet, they're still getting free lunch and free breakfast.
That's wonderful to hear that no matter what, whether or not a student or their parent have been made aware that McKinney services are available to them, that they're still going to be getting breakfast and lunch in your division, no matter what this school year. Are there any other kind of challenges or barriers that you see students kind of facing within the classroom or while they're at school that are really connected to the fact that they're facing housing instability?
I think all liaisons have probably had this experience where we know kiddos are coming to school and not sure where they're going to stay that night. And that can lead to kind of some of internal anxiety and worries for a student that those behaviors might come out in other ways in a classroom. And so really working from a trauma-informed lens on
Mhm.
helping to support them is critical. And I think that's one of the things our district has worked really hard to do is to try to utilize some of that trauma-informed perspective to be able to support students. I know our social work team really works in that kind of place. And it's hard when you're not sure where you're staying and that
Of course.
instability that we want to make sure your basic needs are met as well. So we have certain programs in our district that help to meet some of those basic needs when I'm talking like food and clothing, hygiene products, those kind of things.
That's really helpful to hear about some of those challenges that show that students facing housing instability are coming to school bearing that burden. And it's going to show up in a lot of different ways while they're trying to learn. And connected to that, can you touch on some of the common misconceptions that you might see about students facing homelessness, misconceptions and misunderstandings around that experience that you see, whether it's among general community or even among school staff and administrators?
Absolutely. I think one of the misconceptions I've seen the most when it comes to administrators within a school district is the assumption is our students that are displaced are what's impacting our attendance rates. And that is not the case. We have done
Mhm.
a lot of work gathering data for our students that are displaced and what their attendance looks like and putting protections in place to keep that attendance keep them attending school. So that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions I would say within our own district that it is. And we've done a lot of work about educating that. So I think hopefully we're
Mhm.
decreasing that misconception. The other thing I think that's important to recognize within the community is when folks hear about students being homeless, there's the assumption that their parents are lazy. They're not working, they're living off the doles, those kind of things. That is not the case. These are probably some of the most hardworking people I've ever met in my life that are working multiple jobs to provide for their family to be able to contribute possibly to a doubled up situation or to pay for their hotel if they're in a hotel setting. So it is not people that are unemployed. It's they're working super hard and they're just not making it. Um,
Absolutely.
so, one of the things that I think is important is that education piece to educate those around you of what that looks like.
Mhm. Just in order to mitigate some of those misunderstandings or misconceptions around the experience of our students and their families, what have you found to be some of the most effective approaches to raise awareness among school staff and other administrators and partners? Kind of what are those key messages or ideas or even data points that you find most helpful to kind of get that story and that information across to them so they really have an authentic understanding?
So, kind of two things. One, I'll talk about the school perspective first, and then I'll talk
Mhm.
a little bit about the community. For the
Great.
school, we do a lot of educating, utilizing our school social work team to educate administrators within their building about students that might be unhoused at that time, and then talking about what are the data points. We
Mhm.
do keep data in terms of their attendance and their grades. And if there's concerns on either of those topics, the social worker is working with that family. We have prioritized with our school social work team the most vulnerable populations. And one of those populations are McKinney-Vento students. So they are working with those students and their families to find supports or needs that might need to be met that are not being met. The other thing is really just kind of educating school administrators on how important education is often for our families. The other thing is we've done some book studies for teachers to talk about homelessness and what that means and what does that look like to be displaced and what are things they can do in the classroom to help support that. So that's been, I think, really helpful when we're looking at some of the approaches we've done in the
Mhm.
setting. The community side, I've done a lot of work around just educating the public on homelessness. We have done, to educate our community, we've done radio shows, we've done newspaper articles. Those kind of things have all been helpful to be able to get out the message for people to understand what is McKinney-Vento, what are the displacement of people, what does that look like, and ways to support that.
So this does connect a little bit to all of the wonderful ways that you are able to raise awareness in your community and among school staff, as you just discussed. But I'd love to hear more about the incredible work that you and your team are doing and have done in Spotsylvania. If you could describe some of those activities and specific programming that you've been doing over the years to not only raise awareness, but also do fundraising for your students and for your program in your division.
Sure. I think probably one of the most proudest things, well, there's two, and they kind of go hand in hand. We have something called Treasure House, where families can come and shop once a month for free hygiene, food, school supplies, that kind of thing. And it's 100% supported from the community. So we get donations from different civic groups, from schools themselves. We'll do drives at particular schools to get those items. And we have an event every year called Rock Out, Knock Out Homelessness, usually a Friday and a Saturday at our local Walmart, where we hand out brochures to shoppers and we talk about what being McKinney-Vento means, but we also are collecting items for Treasure House. And we have so many people that get involved with us. Student volunteers is the primary focus, along with our school social work team. And all of the items that are donated then go back to Treasure House to go out
Mhm.
to families who can come and shop once a month for those items at no cost to them. This year, we actually did an event called the Why Behind the Work, kind of a thank you event for people who have donated to us the past couple of years. And with that, they came, we had a breakfast, and then we did immersion activities. So we had an area set up to look like a hotel room. We had someone on our team to talk about Treasure House. We had another person, a member of our team, that talked about kind of the steps to graduation, what that looks like. And then just the other variety of things that we do to support our students, whether it's helping them with behind the wheel or how to get a driver's license or, um, how to obtain their documents, meaning birth certificate and social security card, that kind of thing. But we invited, community members to that. It was very well received. I think we had almost 60 people attend, but it was a great way also for them to network with one another, to talk about ways that they could possibly support together house and our students and what that looks like. So it was a huge success. A couple of the fundraiser things that we've done, I think, that are kind of unique to us, besides, we've done the whole um, the food night at Chick-fil-A, spirit
Spirit night.
things. Yeah. We've also done t-shirt sales where we work with a company that does t-shirts and then donates a percentage back to us. And those t-shirts might be around mental health or kindness or those kind of things. And we advertise in all of the schools. And that's been really a successful fundraising opportunity for us. We really work hard to keep our partnerships with community members. Being on the radio is one way to kind of pull that in, is we'll get people that'll hear the radio and then be like, hey, we want to talk to you. And then we
That's
go out and
great.
talk to different groups. And really it's, I keep saying it's supporting our community, but it's also supporting our students at the same time,
Right.
their needs.
I didn't know about the why behind the work
We
event.
just did that. Yeah, we just did it we did it in November for Homelessness Awareness Month. So a month ago, just a couple weeks ago.
That's such an amazing idea, especially how immersive of an experience it sounds like it was for the people who attended, to really help them develop a deep understanding of all of the different barriers our students face, but also pivoting off of that. It sounds like they really immediately started brainstorming and coming up with ideas of how
Yeah.
they can
And it was
support like a
really
whole
cool.
student through that event.
We had an area set up like a hotel room and we had it blocked off with tape. And then we'd say, okay, 4 people get in there. That's how cramped it would be and we had everything from totes and a mini fridge, just to kind of show what that space looks like, I think. And then like graduation, we had cap and gown and all the things that you need or would like to have experience with when you're looking to graduate. So it was a really great event. Our team worked diligently to pull it off. We've been planning it for a couple of months now, and it just really came together. And we had placemats at each of the place settings that was all McKinney-Vento data, like students we served, how many people lived in hotels, what does it mean to be McKinney-Vento, and that was really great too. So they could, while they're eating breakfast, they're reading as well some of the information.
That's just an amazing, amazing idea. I love the placemats too. That's
Yeah.
really wonderful. I can't wait to share that concept with other
Yes,
liaisons.
absolutely. Because it took some planning, but it was really great to pull it together.
Well, moving on from there, all of those amazing activities and the different fundraising and other programming that you do in Spotsylvania, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit specifically about our early learners. We know that young children facing housing instability are sometimes the most difficult to identify and connect to the support that they need. So could you talk a little bit about how you connect with other early childhood partners in Spotsylvania to ensure that those young learners are connected to the supports that they need to get enrolled in programs before kindergarten?
Sure. So, we have our ECSE program. So I'm connected with the folks that work in that department who recognize some of those things. But the other thing is, when I'm out visiting families at the hotels and I notice folks with little children,
Hmm.
not in school age, I'll say, have you thought about Head Start? Because maybe that might be where they're headed. But if not even Head Start, maybe they're younger and I'm noticing that there might be some delays, I will give them information about Child Find to kind of access those services as well. Because I think it's just, having the ability to have conversations with folks to let them know there's resources out there that can help support their children earlier than
Sure.
coming in for kindergarten, because we all know that is really critical. And of course, our shelter, that is the domestic violence shelter, if they have young children there, they know they can call me and we'll help facilitate to get those students enrolled, or at least start the process through Child Finder or even the Head Start VPI programs that we offer.
Is there a yoga program that you
We do. Yeah,
offer
we do yoga.
to?
We have a yoga instructor that we have been able, very fortunate for several years, to have her go into certain schools with a higher number of students that are McKinney-Vento. And the class is not just McKinney-Vento kids, because we do want to not single that
Sure.
population out, but it is primarily, there has to be McKinney-Vento children involved, and then maybe a couple sprinkles here and there of other students that could benefit. We do yoga. She does it once a week. She's currently at two middle schools and an elementary school, or two elementary schools. Yeah. So two middle, two elementary, and we're getting ready to add an additional elementary school. No, I'm sorry. We're going to add additional elementary. So it'll be three elementary and then two middle schools. And it's a lot of work. I think that's the part that, we don't recognize. It's a lot of work on the school, because they need to be willing to give up space, need to be willing to accommodate the time of the yoga instructor, as well as accommodating the students that we're selecting, that yes, they might miss a little bit of instruction of some time. We try not to miss instruction time, but the benefits are going to outweigh that. We had a class, this was a couple years ago, we had a class at a middle school, and I was helping out that day at the class. And one of the things I noticed was the students, there were three boys in the class who had all lived in local motels for a very long time, like 5, 6 years. There was an exercise they were doing where it was just kind of sitting in silence. They really struggled with that. And the yoga instructor is fabulous. She has worked in an alternative school program, so she's well versed in not only yoga, but of course, education and what's needed. And we started talking afterwards that these students, their nervous system probably never has the opportunity to just be quiet, because
Mhm.
living in a hotel, there's lots of noise around you. Your entire family's in one room. And so that's one of the things she was going to work on, is just helping them to calm their nervous system for very few minutes. And it's great. I mean,
It's
kids now
wonderful.
that have been in yoga for a couple of years, when are we going to have yoga again? Or they see her at the school, can I come to your yoga class again? And that kind of stuff. So it is a very, very cool opportunity. And we know it is making a difference, especially for our students that are displaced, and helping them do some mindfulness activities.
Right. That is wonderful to hear about the opportunity that they're having through those classes. And I can just imagine the ripple effect that it's going to have for those students in and outside of the classroom.
And one of the cool things we have is we have a Google site that I send out to every new family when a student is identified McKinney-Vento. And on that site, we have information about McKinney-Vento and what it is. We have upcoming events that might be happening in our community that would benefit them. But when we had COVID, our yoga instructor made a series of videos. So we keep those videos up on that site so parents can have access to that. And it may not be the exact same thing they're doing in class,
Or
but it is giving some yoga opportunities for all families that are displaced, and looking at the site.
that's really wonderful. So we've touched on our younger learners. If we can pivot a little bit to talking about our older youth who are facing housing instability, specifically, many of those might also be unaccompanied.
Mhm.
And if you could just touch on what are those unique needs or challenges that you see them facing specifically?
I think the biggest need I see is that vulnerability piece for them. They are the most vulnerable population, because a lot of times they might be couch surfing with folks, and they may have not disclosed at first that they're displaced. So once we find out that they are, we want to make sure we're wrapping supports rather quickly around them. to get them connected. So at our high school level, we have 2 part-time McKinney-Vento case managers that work only with our high school students as their primary focus. And they come in and they meet with each student and they kind of do kind of an assessment just to see kind of what their plan is. What do they need? If they're a high school senior, do they need cap and gown? We take care of that. Do they need their documents? There are certain things we like to make sure they're leaving with when they leave high school. If they're an 18-year-old, we like to see that they have their birth certificate, social security card, and if at all possible, their driver's license. So we have a homeless student fund. It's not McKinney-Vento grant. It's all donated that we will use to help pay for behind the wheel. We've made notebooks for each of those students as well. So if they have an IEP, we'll put that in their notebook so they have a copy of their IEP when they leave high school. But we just want to make sure they have all the things they need. But also we want to make sure they're experiencing the really cool things that high school seniors might be experiencing. Do they need prom tickets or homecoming tickets? Do they need an outfit? We make sure we get that done. Do they need a graduation outfit? We make sure that happens. The other really, I think, and much needed thing that we do in our high schools with every high school McKinney-Vento student, our school social worker is doing a suicide ideation assessment on them to see if there's any thoughts of suicide, because we do know there's a higher propensity for kids placed to die by suicide. So we want to make sure we're doing things to assess them and make sure that they're need to be hooked up with services that we're able to do that. But that's for all high school age students, just the unaccompanied minor piece. But I think our 2 part-time case managers really do a great job of making sure they're coming to school. They go over grades. They, hook them up with a tutor if we need to get them connected with a tutor. They're checking in with their school counselor. So it's just one more added adult that's really supporting the students to see what's going on. Like we had an example this summer. We had a young lady that needed to go to summer school. Well, she was having some difficulty. And, with summer school, you can only miss so many days and then it really doesn't count. Well, she immediately reached out to her case manager, her McKinney-Vento case manager, and said, "Oh my gosh, I can't get in the computer. I'm going to miss tomorrow." She was able to intervene, talk to the principal. They figured out what the problem was. She was good to go. And I think if we hadn't had that person, she might have been like, "Okay, I just can't do it," and quit. But having that person you can reach out to help you navigate the grown-up stuff when you don't grown up is really helpful.
How long, I'm just curious with the 2 part-time case managers, how long those positions have been in place?
They've been here for a while. They're paid for under the grant. The personnel has changed a little bit as time has gone on, but we've held them for this entire grant cycle but even before that, we had them before that. So maybe 6 years we've held on to, and it might have been 1, and then we were able to add 2
through your regular McKinney-Vento.
through the grant. Yeah. And it's been great. I don't know what we would do if we didn't have that. I'll be honest.
And it's a wonderful use of the funding because just with those specific examples you were describing, the way that they're really able to wrap around the students and give them that
it's
support
been
and
wonderful.
guidance.
The great part is both of the women that are in the positions right now have been interns with us in the past. So they were an intern in our school social work department and then came over into these roles. And one is a bachelor level student or bachelor level, and the other one is a bachelor graduate, but has started her master's degree. It's great because they know our schools, they know social work, they understand.
Absolutely.
And they're great with connecting to community supports. One of the case managers is helping a student navigate exploring the different military branches in terms of which one they want to go in the military, but they're not really sure which one. So they're doing exploration right now on military branches to figure out what's going to work for that student.
That's
And
wonderful.
then there's also the basic need thing. Like if we have a student that needs a coat, they're more likely to tell the adult that's in front of them because they'll say, "Hey, are there any things you need? Do you need a coat? That would be really great." And we'll work with our community partners to get a coat or a hoodie or whatever they're needing as well.
That is all so wonderful to hear about. And it's clear that you've been doing this for a while and have really established so much impactful programming and developed just a long list of wonderful partnerships, both within your division, but then within the broader community as well. Which leads me to my next question. Just thinking of our liaisons out across the state and even those who might be listening from other states who are newer to their positions and might find the very long list of requirements that liaisons have in their positions to be a little daunting, a little overwhelming. What advice would you give them as they begin to take on this significant role?
I really say kind of it's two parts. Get to know everybody in your division. At your central office, get to know who handles transfers of students, who handles transportation, who handles food service, because those are people that you're going to be working with. But it's helpful when you know who they are and you can say, hey, let me tell you about this kid and what's going on with them, right? To be able to give a little bit of the story. So getting to know everybody in your district that you can, and then I would also say, don't be afraid to think outside the box. Like, think of the things that might be way out here, kind of fringy, and be like, well, how can we make that happen? And really, that's where the greatest things happen from is those fringy ideas. And then really educate people and utilize, and this is easy, utilize certain months to do that education, right? So November, homelessness awareness. March is school social work month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Use those months. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Use those months to educate people in your community that you can then be like, hey, I just want to let you know we have this many McKinney-Vento kids. There's a higher propensity for those students to maybe have some suicidal ideation. That's a great statistic to give in May. Or human trafficking, kind of talk about that and how we know the vulnerability of students that are in foster or in McKinney-Vento or foster care. That vulnerability is increased. And why is it important to recognize that? So when you're using that, you're able to get kind of that information out to other people and really talk about what McKinney-Vento is and how it's important for a district, how it's important for students, how it's important for families, but most of all, how it's important for your community. Because if we're not supporting these students now, we will be as adults if we haven't given them an education
Exactly.
to do what they need to do. So it's really, really important just to kind of keep talking to folks and educating along the way. And I would say get involved in your community. I mean, in the beginning, I worked a lot. I worked a lot outside of normal hours. I went to church groups. I went to scout meetings to talk to people. I went to the COC every month and just sat there and listened. I didn't participate, but I eventually I was a board member. I'm now on committees. Like all of those things are important once you start getting involved, but it's really also giving a voice to your students and their families that may not be seated at the table. So yeah, it's really, really helpful to kind of educate and get to know the folks in your community to do that with.
That's all really great, really tangible advice. So thank you for sharing that with people who are liaisons or just doing similar work as you are in Spotsylvania. For my last question, I'm wondering if you can share a success story of one of your students or just a success story about your program that really keeps you motivated in the work that you do.
Sure. I have a lot of stories, but probably the one that I think is probably the most profound moment is we had a student in our community. He'd been homeless for a very long time. He actually, unfortunately, went into foster care, came out of foster care, was not homeless, but was always on the brink of that homelessness and kept in touch with them. And then they did become displaced again. Well, he was a high school senior. He applied to 5 colleges, got into all 5, and he was a cello player. And he had used the cello of the school for cello playing.
Mhm.
He was getting ready to go to college and needed a cello. So his orchestra teacher and I, with our homeless student fund, went to Richmond, bought him a cello. He received said cello. He went on to college. He graduated from college and is, doing well. But I think all of that has to do with, he had people along the way that helped support him. And I think it's important to recognize a McKinney-Vento liaison is one of those people along the way because you can help connect them with other people as well and keep moving forward. When he went off to college, we helped fill, a basket of stuff to take with him and, just kind of really having those conversations with him of how important education is and how it can change the trajectory for him and his family as well. And he's still playing the cello today. He's a graduate and doing great.
Thank you for sharing that story. I mean, it really just illustrates what a powerful role you're in as a liaison, but also, as you highlighted at many points during this podcast, just the importance of connecting with all of those other division partners, but as well as community partners outside of your division to ensure that students facing housing instability have that network of people and network of support.
I have one other story I can share that
Yes,
we'll talk about
please.
the network. We used to take families to Washington, D.C. for the day during the summer. We would take parent and children. So parents or whoever, many people wanted to sign up on the bus. And we kind of targeted our families that were living in the hotel. And, it really came out of every summer, people come back to school and like, what did you do this summer? And, unfortunately, a lot of our families that are displaced, it's true survival, right? We might get to go to a swimming pool or have a cookout, but it's rough. So we had decided we would take families to DC and, to go see the museums. And so we, pack the lunch. So here, that's me making peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for 54 people to get on a bus. But I used the community to help support. I reached out to a community partner and said, hey, can you pay for a charter bus versus a school bus? Absolutely. They paid for the charter bus. Hey, can you pay for some money to donate so we can take families to Golden Corral at the end of for dinner? Can you pay for chips so we can pack their bags or water or what? But that was everybody coming together to give these students an experience with their families to go have a great day in Washington, D.C. And that's what we did. And it really is a community effort to support these families, but it's for the good of your community too.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that story as well.
Yeah.
As many success stories as I've heard and had liaisons share, I've never thought about that, how our students really often don't have anything to say when they go back to school about a trip that they have gone on or an excursion that they've had over their summer break. And it's so amazing that you were
We've
able
also
to.
gone to Virginia Beach. We took some students and their parents to Virginia Beach one year. So, I mean, it's a pretty good opportunity when you can make it all come together. So we've done summer camp where we made our own summer camp. That's a little harder to pull off. It's a lot more tiring, but we've done community activities like a trolley tour in our town, a trip to the ice cream place, a trip to the zoo, a trip, all within a week, like a summer camp. And that was pretty successful, but that's a lot of work. I will say that's a lot of more work than just saying, hey, let's charter a bus and go to DC. But those were great experiences for kids to get to see, right? To go to a zoo, to do a trolley tour, to do a walking tour, we went to a water park. And I remember one student coming up to us at the water park and they were like, this is the best day ever. And I'm like, it really is the best day ever.
And you're giving them that sense of normalcy
Correct.
that so many
Well,
other kids.
and as a parent, right? I mean, every parent wants their kid to have all these wonderful experiences, but it really truly does come down to the dollar. And if I can't afford to take my kid to the water park, but somebody's offering to do it, absolutely. And I tell families all the time, this is not a handout. This is a hand up. That's all this is a hand up to get you somewhere else. Because I think sometimes that can be hard for parents too, to accept the help that's there. But it's like, not a handout, just a hand up.
It's really inspiring to hear about those different activities, because I feel like, at least for me listening, I immediately think about those specific students and the memories that they'll have from those trips, and just the impact on their, potentially on their mental health. And again, what it's like for them to be able to go back to school and talk
Right.
about those
Yeah, the cool
experiences and
stuff.
those trips. Yeah. Well, we thank you so much, Michelle, for taking the time to share all of your success stories and your insights and experiences with us. It's clear that you're making such a difference for students and families in Spotsylvania. To listeners who would like to learn more about the amazing work of Virginia liaisons across the state, or to learn who your local McKinney-Vento liaison is, please visit www.projecthopevirginia.org. And thank you so much for joining us.